What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Caveman Barbecue Outdoors. I know it's been a while. I wonder if you guys missed me. I missed you, but you probably didn't miss me. We got a little brisket competition going on in the neighborhood, so we are on our way to Costco to get ourselves a prime brisket.
Is Zabe.
Woo-hoo. Alrighty, y'all, competition brisket time. I'm gonna say this about a million times throughout this video. If you were coming over to my house and eating a brisket, it won't be like this. Competition briskets are a completely different animal. So we're gonna do a couple different steps here, some weird off the wall stuff, just to make our brisket stand out. And I'll kind of explain them as we go. So here's our brisket. It's a 16.99, so 17-pound USDA prime from Costco, just what I typically always cook. I'm gonna let it hang out here before I trim it up. First thing we're gonna do is actually take you over to the stovetop. And the first thing I do differently when making a competition brisket, and again, you can take a shot every time I say this. This is not something I do on a typical backyard brisket, not your typical Texas style at all. For a competition brisket, I always do an injection. So if I take about 2 tablespoons of butter, throw them in a little saucepan, I'm gonna let that dissolve down for a bit. Turn my heat up a little bit. There we go. So yes, it is a prime brisket, so it doesn't need a ton of extra fat. When people talk about juicy barbecue or juicy meat, that's actually fat, right? So it's, you know, your mind is perceiving that fat as juiciness. So we're gonna give a little bit extra pop with some butter. We are also going to save some tallow today. But first thing I'm gonna do is I went ahead and I diced these off camera. We're gonna throw in about 3 cloves of garlic, and then about a third of a Vidalia onion, or a sweet onion. We're gonna let those saute down a little bit. I did cut the onions a little bit thin. I am going to strain this off and just keep the juice for my injection. And by the way, I'm also gonna be using this as my spritz. So we're gonna cut it with a little bit of water, and we're gonna put it in my little sprayer. That way we can get the brisket nice and moist as well. So we're gonna let that go a little bit. Alrighty, so we're cooking this down a little bit. I want those onions just to get a little bit of color. And we of course wanna be careful. We don't wanna burn the garlic. Burnt garlic doesn't taste good. Sauteed garlic, however, is amazing. And I wish you guys could smell this. I think there are very few things in the world that smell better than butter and garlic sauteing. It's a pretty heavenly smell. We're gonna let this go just a little bit longer here, just to get a little bit more color, get those onions to sweat out. Yeah, we're starting to get some color in there. Smells so good, huh? Alrighty guys, you see how the garlic is turning a little bit brown and the onions are starting to change color a little bit. They've sweat out at this point. We don't want to go much further than this as far as our saute. So I'm going to go ahead and add to this is just some low sodium beef broth. There we go. And I'm going to cut my heat down on low here. And I'm going to add about half a can of water to that. I'd say about a third of a can. Now, you want to be careful if you do an injection. Beef broth does contain salt. So you want to make sure you have some serious salt control when you actually go and season the brisket, because you don't want to over salt it. So what I'm going to do here is just let that incorporate a little bit. I don't want this to get super hot. So let me actually grab a spoon and try it. Pretty darn good. So I don't want this to get too hot. So over there, I have a bowl, I guess like a mixing bowl with some ice cubes in there. I don't want to cook my brisket and braise it from the inside out. So I'm gonna make sure before I inject the brisket, we're gonna get this on ice, get it to room temperature before we put it anywhere near the brisket. Because, you know, that's a easy way to ruin it, and no bueno. I don't want to do that. So make sure you let your injection come to room temperature or a little bit colder before you put it inside your brisket. Hey guys, so off camera, I forgot to mention this, and this is totally an optional step, but I put like just a couple dashes of soy sauce in this. Make sure you use low sodium soy sauce or Worcestershire, or however the hell you say it, that W sauce would also work pretty good in this as well. Just a couple dashes just to give a little bit extra pop, but we are about wrapped up here. So what I'm gonna do is take this guy, excuse the mess in the sink. We're gonna put them in a bowl of ice water, or ice rather. Again, it's very important that we let this come to room temperature, so I'm actually gonna pop this in the fridge in the meantime while I trim this brisket up. Alrighty y'all, the time has come. We're gonna go ahead and get this guy trimmed up right now. So, as always, don't be a rookie. Open your brisket on the fat you're gonna trim off. So a small incision there. As always, sharp knife always helps. And because we're now fancy and civilized people, we have gloves somewhere that I'm gonna put on. Alrighty, now that we're gloved up, let's go ahead and get this guy getting going. Okay. As always, I like to start on the back just to get a good assessment of what we're dealing with here. So pretty thin on the flat right here, no big deal. We're gonna go ahead and get that taken care of. So on a competition brisket, I'm gonna be very careful with what I trim. So usually you're only serving from like the middle portion and maybe some burnt ends for the judges. So I'm gonna make sure we have a really nice and easy trim, nice and heavy trim rather, on the backside. Typically, you've heard me say this on my other brisket videos, I typically don't trim off all this tiny fat on the back. It doesn't make a huge difference, but in this case, because it is a competition and there is money on the line, or pride, which is worth more than money to me, we're gonna make sure we get all this stuff trimmed off. Or the vast majority of it, doesn't have to be all of it. Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and knock out the top end, which is gonna be our presentation end, so the most important part of this whole brisket right here. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of fat on this fat cap. Actually, that's a complete lie. There's only a couple places we gotta trim off. So let's get to work on that. First order of business, as always, we're gonna take this mohawk down, and you can see pretty decent intramuscular fat on this guy. Much better than what I got last time. So perfect. We're gonna take this mohawk down just a little bit further. Right about there. Always save that meat, guys. Don't waste it. And then we're gonna beat our meat. The reason why I do that, not trying to tenderize the brisket. What I'm trying to do is make the flat and the point almost the same level so they cook more evenly. If this is way up tall and this is way down low, it's gonna burn and not cook at the same pace. So make sure we get it about even right there. Perfect. And then we're gonna shape this guy up. So it's pretty thin over here. So we're just gonna come over here and swoop this guy off, probably right around there. So follow my trace. And again, do not throw any of this away, guys. This is all really good meat. Save it for sausage, save it for burgers, save it for ground beef, meatloaf, whatever. Just save it. And then right here, we want no corners. This is gonna burn off. So we're gonna round this puppy off kind of like so. Let me do this without amputating fingers. There we go. Nice little trim. And you can see the fat cap on this guy is actually right where we want it to be, right around a 1/4 inch, maybe a little thinner over here. So not much we gotta take on, maybe a little bit over here. Trim this guy down. And let me know down in the comments below, is it just me guys, or has beef gotten significantly leaner over the last couple of months? I mean, this is a prime brisket and there's hardly any intramuscular fat in this guy. I'm actually kind of surprised. It's almost choice, if not select level of fat. So a little confused what's going on with beef lately. This is not the only one. I mean, the last brisket I cooked just last weekend was the same way. I mean, just super lean. So I'm not sure what's going on with beef in the United States, but it seems to be getting a little leaner and leaner. Yeah, I'm gonna trim this guy around so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm just trimming this fat cap down just a little bit. You can see it's pretty heavy in this part. So we really want good intramuscular fat in a brisket, or actually in any meat. Because like I said when I was making that injection, fat is flavor, fat is juiciness. And on a brisket, if you're gonna be nuking it in the smoker for 12 hours at a time, if not longer, you really want that fat to act like a moisture barrier and help create a, well, intramuscular fat wise, you want it to create it's gonna create a juicier, not as dry product. So super important to have good fat in a brisket, especially if you're gonna be smoking it. You know, if you're gonna be braising it in the oven or anything like that, crock pot style, it doesn't need quite as much fat just because you're gonna be braising it with that liquid, but definitely smoker, it's gonna need it. All I'm doing is just shaving some of this fat off. Like I was saying, fat is flavor, but we don't want a mouthful of just fat. We only want about a 1/4 inch of fat on our meat. And you can see that this is just pure fat coming off right now. So don't want that. Don't want to serve that to judges or my family, maybe the dogs because they love it. But we're actually going to save all of this for tallow that we're going to use on this brisket. And then whatever we don't use for tallow is going in the freezer. That way, next time I shoot a deer, I have some fat to make some sausage, because venison is super lean and we don't want dry venison. Right, Mom? Another goal behind the trim, beside knocking off all this unnecessary fat, you want to create a brisket that's as aerodynamic as possible. Whenever you're cooking in an offset smoker, you're using, I may sound like a complete nerd here, but you're using convection. What's helping to cook the brisket is going to be the movement of air coming over the meat. So it's going to be kind of going like this. If I have anything sticking out, you know, like the tomahawk over here, for example, or any of these odd ends, they're gonna burn up and not deliver a good product. It's also going to impede, big words for a caveman, I know. It's gonna impede the flow of air, the airflow, easier way to say that, in the cook chamber. So we wanna cut off all these little straggly bits and make sure we have a smooth surface. That way the air moves easily over the brisket, making it cook evenly, making sure everyone gets a good smoke bath. All right. Since presentation is everything in competition barbecue, I'm gonna do a little bit more aggressive of a trim as I normally do. And then I'm also gonna scrape the surface. This scraping is just gonna hide a lot of these knife marks. What I'm gonna do now is get it flipped over back on this side, and we're gonna get ready to inject. So injecting is going to be a little bit different than cutting. So whenever you slice this brisket, you want to slice it this way against the grain. Whenever we inject, you actually want to inject it with the grain. So we're going to go ahead and make sure our injection is where it needs to be temperature-wise and is still not hot. And we're going to get this injected and seasoned up. Alrighty guys, time to hit this thing with a little bit of injection. So it's preferred and actually much easier to inject this guy fat side down. So what we want to do is you want to follow, unlike everything else, and I may have said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Unlike everything else, we want to inject with the grain. So what I'm going to do is fill this guy up. And again, I made sure this was at room temp and I went ahead and I strained it out. So we want to go in and inject, and you're gonna see it puff up just a little bit, like that. And we're gonna go in, oh, And we're just gonna keep doing that little song and dance until we get this guy pretty puffed up here. I'm gonna hit the flat, a little bit of extra, just because it's so lean. I don't want it to dry out. So don't be afraid to come back in and just touch up a little bit on the flat. And by the way, for those of you that like prime rib, this injection on prime rib is also amazing. So our little Chewini is absolutely loving this. He's having a field day. Time to get this guy seasoned up over here. What I'm gonna do is actually, should have done this earlier, but I'm gonna move a cooling rack underneath this for a couple different reasons. One, moisture is gonna kind of suck up all of your rub. It's gonna make it pretty, it's gonna wash it out a little bit. So we're gonna put a cooling rack underneath. I also want the seasoning to adhere to the brisket. So what we're gonna do, because this side is already really moist, I don't need a binder at all on this side. So as always, we're gonna hit it with some black pepper first. Don't you dare forget the sides. I'm actually gonna do those first. And a lot of people ask me, I know we mentioned this a little bit on my last brisket video, why I don't have black pepper in my rub, and why I apply it separately and why I apply it first. So black pepper, because it's so coarse, is gonna usually sink to the bottom of a bottle. So and on top of that, if you apply it with a rub, or if you apply it secondary to any of the finer powders like garlic powder or anything like that, it tends to just bounce off and you tend not to get any stickage. So I always go with black pepper first, just to make sure we have a good amount on there. Black pepper is what sets your crust. It is probably the most important ingredient in Texas barbecue or barbecue in general. It's where all your flavor is. It's what helps develop that really nice bark. So black pepper, very important, always goes on first. And you want to be generous with it. It is very hard to over pepper a brisket or a steak. Anything that's gonna go on heat, it's gonna really mellow out that peppery bite. So don't be afraid to get really liberal with it. Alrighty guys, secret weapon right here. I'm not sure where you guys are at, but right there. So again, take a shot. This is the 5th or 6th time you've heard me say this today. If I was cooking for you at home, regular Texas brisket, I would not inject it, and I definitely wouldn't be seasoning it, whatever the hell this is. So typically Texas brisket, so the way brisket should be is salt and pepper, and if you're feeling a little frisky, maybe some garlic powder. This is not those things. So there is salt in here, there is pepper on there, but we also put some garlic powder, onion powder, a little bit of brown sugar, and some other stuff that I may tell you guys later. But this is just gonna give a little bit of a pop, just because whenever a judge is eating a brisket, I mean, they're eating a lot of them, right? So they really want, you really want something to stand out and give a little bit of a pop. We're gonna go ahead and hit this guy with our little seasoning blend here. And just like we were talking about on the pepper, do not be afraid of this. You cannot oversalt a brisket. It is very difficult. And this is where this cooling rack is really coming in handy. Getting it lifted off the floor of the sheet pan, or off the bottom of the sheet pan. Looks pretty good. With my gloved hand, I'm just gonna put a little bit of pressure here just to make sure everything adhered. Then I'm gonna come back and touch up any of the bald spots again. With our presentation side, we're gonna put a little bit of a binder, and only on my fat side. Now you can do this on both sides if you'd like. I only really care about the presentation side just because the non-fat cap side, the bottom of the brisket, had all that moisture from the injection on there. I can't seem to find my words today, folks. I'm focused on winning this competition. This is just mustard and pickle juice. This does not add any flavor to it. It just gives it a nice tacky surface in order to have your rub stick on here. And because this is the presentation side, that is very important, of course. So we're gonna repeat the process. Go on, black pepper, heavy. All right, I'm gonna save the last of my black pepper here just to touch everything up. And we're gonna go on, same process. A little bit of my extra special, kind of a secret, not so secret rub. Retouch my edges. Good to go right there. And what I'm gonna do, again, because this is a competition, cooking for strangers here that aren't afraid of hurting my feelings, I am gonna go through and just touch up my fat cap, make sure I have a really good bark on there. We are good to go. We're just gonna let this seasoning adhere and draw out some moisture. This is the benefit of having a cooling rack underneath. It's really gonna help that air circulate, but we're gonna make sure our fire is good to go for this guy. We got some tallow sitting on it right now just to get a little bit of smoke, but other than that, I think we're gonna be good to go and get this guy on the pit. As always, fatty end towards the fire. We put a meter thermometer in there, not because we give a hoot about internal temperature. You don't cook for temperature, you cook for time and texture. But it's gonna help me keep a really good eye on the pit's internal temperature, ambient temperature. Make sure we're not cooking too hot or too slow. So we're gonna leave this lid down for at least the next 4 hours, really help develop a good bark. That is super important. I have my spritz bottle inside, just the leftover injection with a little bit of water. I'm not going to spritz until the bark is set. And whenever you spritz, by the way, guys, you want to avoid the fat cap because it's going to slow down that rendering process. So you want to make sure you just spritz the areas that are dry. You don't want to spritz the whole brisket. So let this guy hang out for the next 4 hours. Keep our eye on the fire, and we'll be back with you guys shortly. Alrighty, y'all, just wanted to give you a quick little update. I've been holding pretty steady right around 225 to 250 degrees, so here's what we're looking at right now, y'all. As you can see, starting to get some good color. I'm actually going to go ahead and spritz this, and like I said earlier inside, you want to avoid the fat cap whenever you spritz, guys. It's going to really slow down your fat render, but we're looking pretty darn good. We're probing right around 150-ish degrees, so not quite to the stall yet. Gonna get this shut down and show you guys our little fire over here. So burning a post oak fire, nice and clean, looking good, and we're going to be out here for another few hours, y'all. Alrighty, y'all, it is starting to sprinkle here a little bit. As you can see, we are looking fantastic on this brisket right now, guys. I'm going Goldie's method on this, so I'm not going to wrap it. I might throw it in a foil boat here in a little bit. Some of the corners are getting a little crispy, but it looks absolutely fantastic. That bark is right where we want it. Beautiful color on this thing. Now just trying to get some more of this fat rendered, and we should be pretty good to go. I'll take you guys with me on the journey. Alrighty, just wanted to keep you guys in the loop here. As you can see, I totally lied to you. I told you I was not going to wrap this. However, I did. Check the temp. The texture was just not where I needed it to be, so I decided I had to do a little Texas crutch, wrap it in foil here just to speed up this cooking process. I wanted to give it enough time for a decent rest, so again, just went ahead and wrapped it, and we're going to give it another couple hours wrapped, and hopefully it'll be where we need it to be texture-wise. If it looks like I'm tired, it's because I am. So, brisket took way longer than expected, and I completely lied to you guys and said I was going to leave it unwrapped or maybe do a foil boat method, but I ended up wrapping it because it took way longer than I needed it. Way longer than I expected, rather. That being said, I typically do not like to wrap in foil, but the bark held up quite nicely. And the reason why I don't like to wrap in foil, just to preface that, is It tends to destroy your bark, but as you can see, the bark held together quite well. So we're gonna go ahead and get this guy ready to rest. It is imperative if you're gonna rest it in a food warmer, oven, cooler like I'm doing just for ease of transport, make sure you leave the brisket or the ribs or whatever protein on the counter at room temperature first for the first hour. That's gonna help it kind of slow down that cooking process and slow down that carryover. You will overcook your meat 100% of the time, get really nasty shreds, nasty presentation if you put it directly into a warmer. So let this guy sit on the counter for about an hour. This is a cooler that we have cleaned out. I'm gonna take this little pan and just gonna put it in the bottom if it fits. It does not fit. Let me get a different one. Maybe this one? All right, now that I found the correct pan, I'm just gonna take a pan, put it on the floor of the cooler. So we're just gonna put that there, that way we don't make a big mess of it. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is also rewrap this guy. So I'm gonna take some foil. That is not the piece that I want. We're a hot mess this morning, y'all. Hot mess. Let's stick that down there. We want a good seal when we wrap. All right, we're gonna move this guy over. Oh, that is not cold. So just be aware it's gonna be hot. I'll ladle some of this over. And then I'm gonna come over here and take a couple globs. This is tallow that we rendered from this brisket's fat. So I'm just gonna take a couple, and we're gonna be good to go here next. So what I'm gonna do is wrap this as tight as I can as to not make a huge mess. And again, you're gonna wanna create a tight seal here. That way it retains all that moisture. And then to take it a step further, if you have saran wrap, this would be an ideal time to wrap this whole thing in some saran wrap just to make sure you have a perfect seal. That's gonna keep this thing as moist as possible. It's gonna help kind of steam it. And if you have any spots in the brisket that are a little over or undercooked, it's gonna help make it nice and tender. But we're gonna throw this guy in the cooler here. It's been resting on the counter for about an hour. We're gonna leave it in the cooler for at least the next 3-ish. And we're gonna slice into this guy and take you down over to the judges' tables and see how we did. This is just a neighborhood barbecue cook-off, but I just so happen to have probably some of the best barbecue cooks in the state of Texas in my neighborhood. For whatever reason, I don't know why, they're all like barbecue experts. So, you know, this is not like a walk in the park. So we'll see how we do compared to some of those other guys.
But we have blind judging. We already have pans up here, and all the contestants know what letter they are. So while we're outside talking about.
Oh, you can put it in your pocket.
I'm gonna let it cool down. That's a home run.
What?
It looks amazing. Good fat render on it.
Yeah.
Good smoke ring. You just see it. It's really super tender. Brisket.
All right, babe. How you feeling?
Pretty good. Pretty confident. Wish it was a little bit more tender, but I think we're gonna be in the mix here. I think we'll be in the mix for sure.
So we have everything tallied up. I will say everybody's was really good. Everybody had a lot of really great feedback. So no hating on anybody who didn't get the first, second, third place. But we do have a few prizes up here. First place gets a little booze and a nice America drink cup. has a Bluetooth speaker, $100 Visa gift card. Second place has $50 Visa gift card, still has booze, has little donuts and stuff. And then third place is the booze in the other. Okay? So third place is Dave.
Woo! Better than last.
Yeah.
Second place. All right, and first place.
Oh!
Aw. That's our neighbor.
It's our neighbor, yes. All right, y'all. Well, that's a wrap. It was, of course, a grand old time. You know, making food, hanging out in the backyard, listening to Texas country music with an open fire is never a bad thing at all. You know, it wasn't the result we wanted, but third place out of a pretty good group of competitors is nothing to turn your nose up at. I feel like I could have done a little bit better had I had more time to rest the brisket, make it a little bit more tender, maybe render more fat, but you know, beside all that, of course, hats off to John and Kyle, who finished first and second ahead of me, and great time, and you know, I'm really looking forward to doing this again. This was my first barbecue competition. Looking forward to doing some more in the future here. And yeah, guys, that's gonna wrap it up. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. Looking forward to seeing you guys on my next video, which, by the way, is gonna be a deep sea fishing trip with the boys, which should be pretty interesting. We'll see how it turns out. But again, appreciate you guys. Glad you're back. Glad I'm back. You know, we'll turn out some more content here for you shortly. And yeah, have a good one. Until next time.